On the 4th of August, 1914, the German army invaded Belgium. This was part of the Schlieffen Plan aiming to circumvent the French defenses. The first serious obstacle for the Germans was the city of Liège. I made a video about the Battle of Liège, a link to which you can find below. A few days after these events, Brussels, the Belgian capital, came under attack itself. Following are two first-hand accounts from these crucial days. First, we have an article by Henry M. de Galix, who witnessed the destruction of the Brussels wireless telegraphic and telephonic station, constructed by Rudolf Goldschmidt. The station, which started operations only a few months before the war, was destroyed in detail, although not by the Germans. Here is the article.
In the neighborhood of Brussels, upon a plot of ground given by King Albert, Mr. Robert Goldschmidt had erected one of the most powerful wireless telegraphic and telephonic stations in the world. This station was constructed so that direct wireless communication might be held between Brussels and Boma, the capital of the Congo state, a distance of about 4,000 miles. After trials extending over 2 years, Mr. Goldschmidt succeeded in establishing communication with Boma 3 or 4 months before the declaration of war. Current was supplied by a high-frequency alternator driven by a motor of 400 horsepower, the current for which was supplied by an adjoining local supply at 6,000 volts. The maximum wavelength was about 10,000 meters. The antenna consisted of 77 wires supported by 8 steel masts of 7 square meters in cross-section placed in 2 parallel rows. The height of the 2 masts nearest to the station was 630 feet and that of the remaining 6 was 300 feet. All the masts were stayed with numerous steel cables. In the month of August 1914, the foundations of a 9th mast of the same type as the others was commenced. This mast would have been square in section, the sides being 18 feet long and 1,000 feet in height, and arrangements had been made for an electric lift to reach the top. It was to be placed between the other masts to raise the antenna, and thus increase the radius of action of the installation. On Wednesday, August 19th of the year 1914, the most contradictory rumors reached Brussels. Some folks affirmed that the Germans were at Louvain and would not stay to enter the capital. Others said that the town was protected by a ring of troops. Nevertheless, the hurried departure of Queen Elizabeth appeared to support the views of the pessimists. Another event more unexpected and more convincing succeeded in persuading all that the enemy was at hand. About 1 o'clock in the afternoon, a violent explosion was heard in the direction of the wireless station at Laeken, near Brussels. By chance I was close by. At first I thought that the bridge had been blown up, when suddenly I was astounded to see one of the wireless masts bend over and fall to the ground. I had scarcely recovered from my surprise when another explosion occurred, more violent than the first, and a second mast fell. They are blowing up the station. The Germans must be near, I said to myself. I tried to get nearer, but at 200 meters from the station I was stopped by a cordon of town guards. By making a detour I was able to skirt the station, and was then only separated from it by the canal of Wilbroek. I waited for some moments, and then the characteristic throbbing of a German aeroplane made me lift my eyes. It came slowly toward me, gradually descending until I could quite clearly see the black cross painted on its wings. It flew over the station, encircling it twice, and was starting in the direction of Louvain when suddenly a shot was fired near me. Others followed and continued unceasingly for some minutes. The German aeroplane, finding itself a target, turned slowly and disappeared. A group of Belgian military engineers ran to the other side of the canal and called out to me, "Look out! Run for your life." Without knowing why, I ran back some yards. A third explosion occurred and a third mast fell to the ground. The soldiers returned and one after the other the masts fell. The soldiers had cut the cables on one side so that the masts bent toward the other side. Then, having mined the foundation, they fired the fuse and ran back as quickly as possible, while the light metal framework slowly crumpled up in the midst of volumes of thick, black smoke. In one case a mast was prevented from falling by the antenna of a neighboring mast. In another case the first explosion only shook the mast, and the blasting had to be repeated once or twice until the mast was utterly destroyed. At about 3:30 the antennae were entirely destroyed, but the transmitting and receiving station was still intact. This station was situated in a tunnel under the Vilvoorde Road, between the Wilbroek Canal and the ground where the masts had stood. It was only possible to carry away some of the light instruments. The remainder had to be destroyed. The most delicate parts were broken up with hammers, and to complete the destruction the station was blown up with dynamite. The explosion was so violent that part of the granite parapet was broken and a large crack opened in the roof of the tunnel. Finally, so that even the ruins could not be put to any possible use, the station was filled with straw and hay and set on fire. A dense smoke rose from the tunnel. It was seen rising over the canal until the evening, and the last bursts of flame were not extinguished when a detachment of the enemy's cavalry appeared on the scene. We heard afterwards that the Germans had hoped to seize the wireless station, which would have put them into communication with the most distant points of the theater of war. Orders had been given to a troop of cavalry to advance by forced marches to prevent its destruction, but the Belgian authorities, warned of this move, were able to forestall them. The German plans were frustrated, but the defeat cost Mr. Robert Goldschmidt not only an enormous sum of money, but also the patient research and labor of 3 years.
Next, we have the account of German troops entering Brussels as witnessed by Richard Harding Davis, written on 24th of August, 1914. This captures the fear and awe that the people felt as the German war machine swept through their city.
The entrance of the German army into Brussels has lost the human quality. It was lost as soon as the 3 soldiers who led the army bicycled into the Boulevard du Regent and asked the way to the Gare du Nord. When they passed, the human note passed with them. What came after them, and 24 hours later is still coming, is not men marching, but a force of nature like a tidal wave, an avalanche or a river flooding its banks. At this minute it is rolling through Brussels as the swollen waters of the Conemaugh Valley swept through Johnstown. At the sight of the first few regiments of the enemy we were thrilled with interest. After they had passed for 3 hours in one unbroken steel-gray column were bored. But when hour after hour passed and there was no halt, no breathing time, no open spaces in the ranks, the thing became uncanny, inhuman. You returned to watch it, fascinated. It held the mystery and menace of fog rolling toward you across the sea. The gray of the uniforms worn by both officers and men helped this air of mystery. Only the sharpest eye could detect among the thousands that passed the slightest difference. All moved under a cloak of invisibility. Only after the most numerous and severe tests, with all materials and combinations of color that give forth no color, could this gray have been discovered. That it was selected to clothe and disguise the German when he fights is typical of the German staff in striving for efficiency, to leave nothing to chance, to neglect no detail. After you have seen this service uniform under conditions entirely opposite, you are convinced that for the German soldier it is his strongest weapon. Even the most expert marksman cannot hit the target unless he can see. It is a gray-green, not the blue-gray of our Confederates. It is the gray of the hour just before daybreak, the gray of unpolished steel, of mist among green trees. I saw it first in the Grand Place in front of the Hôtel de Ville. It was impossible to tell if in that noble square there was a regiment or a brigade. You saw only a fog that melted into the stones, blended with the ancient house fronts, which shifted and drifted, but left you nothing at which you could point. Later, as the army passed below my window, under the trees of the Botanical Park, it merged and was lost against the green leaves. It is no exaggeration to say that at 100 yards you can see the horses on which the Uhlans ride, but cannot see the men who ride them. If I appear to overemphasize this disguising uniform, it is because of all the details of the German outfit it appealed to me as one of the most remarkable. The other day, when I was with the rear guard of the French dragoons and cuirassiers and they threw out pickets, we could distinguish them against the yellow wheat or green gorse at half a mile, while these men passing in the street, when they have reached the next crossing, become merged into the gray of the paving stones and the earth swallows them. In comparison, the yellow khaki of our own American army is about as invisible as the flag of Spain. Yesterday, Major General von Jaratsky, the German military governor of Brussels, assured Burgomaster Max that the German army would not occupy the city, but would pass through it. It is still passing. I have followed in campaigns 6 armies, but excepting not even our own, the Japanese or the British, I have not seen one so thoroughly equipped. I am not speaking of the fighting qualities of any army, only of the equipment and organization. The German army moved into this city as smoothly and as compactly as an Empire State Express. There were no halts, no open place, no stragglers. This army has been on active service 3 weeks, and so far there is not apparently a chinstrap or a horseshoe missing. It came in with the smoke pouring from cookstoves on wheels, and in an hour had set up post office wagons, from which mounted messengers galloped along the line of column distributing letters and at which soldiers posted picture postcards. The infantry came in files of 5, 200 men to each company, the lancers in columns of 4, with not a pennant missing. The quick-firing guns and field pieces were 1 hour at a time in passing, each gun with its caisson and ammunition wagon taking 20 seconds in which to pass. The men of the infantry sang, "Fatherland, my fatherland." Between each line of song they took 3 steps. At times 2,000 men were singing together in absolute rhythm and beat. When the melody gave way, the silence was broken only by the stamp of iron-shod boots, and then again the song rose. When the singing ceased, the bands played marches. They were followed by the rumbles of siege guns, the creaking of wheels and of chains clanking against the cobblestones, and the sharp bell-like voices of the bugles. For 7 hours the army passed in such solid column that not once might a taxicab or trolley car pass through the city. Like a river of steel it flowed, gray and ghost-like. Then, as dusk came and thousands of horses' hoofs and thousands of iron boots continued to tramp forward, they struck tiny sparks from the stones, but the horses and men who beat out the sparks were invisible. At midnight pack wagons and siege guns were still passing. At 7 this morning I was awakened by the tramp of men and bands playing jauntily. Whether they marched all day or not I do not know, but for 26 hours the Grey Army rumbled with the mystery of fog and the pertinacity of a steam roller. The coming of the German troops was kept a secret from the people of Brussels until the last minute. The proclamation of the mayor hit the people like a clap of thunder. The mayor went out to meet the troops and upon their appearance had a white flag held aloft. He talked then with a German officer and received from the latter the assurance that nothing would happen to the people if they would give up all acts of violence towards the Germans. The entry of the Germans led to scenes of panicky fright among the people in the villages near Brussels. Brussels itself is like a dead city. In the environs the people are in great fear that they will be held responsible and punished energetically because of the destruction of German business houses in Brussels. The bad conscience of the people of Brussels is indicated by the fact that in the last few days they have hurriedly removed the barricades and barbed wire defenses, for the understandable order came that it was useless to defend the open city. Brussels is completely cut off from the outer world. The citizens are in deathly fear, which is heightened through continually misleading newspaper reports. Until the last day the newspapers stated that the Germans were reluctant to fight. Even noble families have begun to flee from their castles, and they sat, just like the poor folks, on their baggage in the North Station, in order to escape via Ostend to England. Railway service was soon halted. Moreover, it became impossible to obtain automobiles.
I hope you enjoyed. Until next time.